I'm Ron Donaire, CEO of Intuizi, and I have with me today Dan Frechtling. Dan is CEO of Boltive, a company that offers cutting-edge technology for privacy and security. They are focused on helping operations, marketing, and privacy professionals protect their brands in an age where regulations and reputation are key to driving privacy-first growth. Dan, welcome to the Data Deep Dive.
Thanks, Ron. Great to be here in the Data Deep Dive.
The pleasure is ours. Why don't you tell me a little bit about what you're working on this year?
Yeah, well, we're seeing 2023 as a pretty significant year in data privacy. We knew what was going to happen with the arrival of 5 new state privacy laws. We didn't know that the FTC was going to be resurging in its enforcement of privacy laws. We didn't know that there was going to be as many class actions, or that 2 more states, looking like Iowa and Indiana, are passing their laws, and Washington State passing a very intense health data law. So this is causing us to tune our software in new ways to really make sure that we're protecting our clients from all the changes.
Yeah, I mean, I think privacy is like one of the hottest topics that it affects basically anybody that does any type of business online, right? Like it's like if there is any type of consumer interaction, any type of data that is being collected, whether it be of the personally identifiable kind or even the anonymous kind, there's still so much that has to be considered. So many things that can be inadvertently tripped on. And quite frankly, even if you're trying to follow all of the guidelines, sometimes they're somewhat unclear. I know that in California, for instance, the CCPA has been in effect for such a long time. I think the CPRA technically was enacted in January and being enforced in June, which has pretty definitive clarifications, but there's still so much unknown about how to actually implement it in your business. So it's great that you have software that kind of helps simplify that, or at least point people in the right direction. Well, before we actually get into what it is the software does specifically, why don't you tell me a little bit about what brought you to the idea of Boltive?
Sure, yeah. So then there's kind of a personal and a professional side to this. On the personal side, I'll start with that because that really drives why it is such a mission. I had been a marketer most of my career, and then something very profound happened, which was my wife was diagnosed with cancer. And I'd never had cancer in the family before. So I started undertaking all kinds of research, trying to understand what the prognosis was and what we could do. And as I was going through that process, I started to be followed and tracked by these shady cancer treatments and other forms of clickbait. And it was really invasive. Opened my eyes to what was going on. And these ads were so pervasive and so intense that they persisted even after my wife passed away. That is how durable the ads were. So yeah. I discovered really how marketing and advertising technology had gone to excess and creating this kind of abuse. And so that was really, from a personal standpoint, what really gripped me. From a professional standpoint, our clients at Boltive really took us in the direction of privacy. We've been a malware business for about 6 or 7 years, but the patents and the approaches that we've developed around discovering malware are very applicable to the problem of privacy violations. And we had clients coming to us saying, what are all these trackers doing on my ads, and how can I get rid of them? And why are they using my ads to extract and exfiltrate user data and form profiles on people? So really another version of what I had experienced myself. And what we've really discovered is that across the board, understaffed privacy operations in companies mean that you're in a situation where you often have to trust, but cannot verify your systems. And there's a whole slew of privacy technologies, consent management platforms being one of them, other forms of data discovery being another, that you have to trust without verifying. And it didn't work in the Cold War, and it doesn't work in privacy. So what we've seen when we do attempt to verify, which is what our technology does very well, is that vendors are mishandling consent and data sharing about 25 to 50% of the time.
Wow.
That creates exposure, right? For enterprises, for brands, and for all the vendors, of course. So this is how we created what we call our privacy or secret shopper technology. It's secret shoppers for privacy compliance that detects and corrects data sharing errors.
Wonderful. Yeah, I mean, that is, one of the most personal missions that we've had at the Data Deep Dive. We have so many reasons to go into business, but having like a personal mission kind of is like one of the things that like I find a very big differentiator in what is successful and what is not. And yeah, completely agree. I mean, one of the premises of our business here at Intuizi is to basically do all of our data analysis in an anonymous capacity without resolving the identity of a single individual, which is still extremely helpful to a business, because at the end of the day, nobody wants to run afoul of privacy laws. Nobody needs to know exactly what Ron Donaire is doing. They just want to know someone like Ron Donaire is out there to buy my product, right? Like that's the end goal. So having said that, the ability to achieve that for our business is extremely difficult. We go through great lengths to be able to have certain frameworks to analyze data without actually having it touch anything in particular as far as people's hands, or having data be in the wrong place at the wrong time. So even just like a normal like website operator or a publisher has an immense amount of exposure when they, as you mentioned, trust having advertisements run on their property, when they're having JavaScripts pull in all sorts of third-party things that could potentially track. I mean, who knows? There might be mining some sort of cryptocurrency. There's all sorts of things that could potentially happen. But one of the worst things that could happen at this point is running afoul of these privacy laws, not getting the right consents, taking in information when it shouldn't be taking in. So maybe can you walk us through exactly how these, like, I think you called it the secret shopper, walk us through the use case of how that works, how that helps the content owner.
Yeah, sure, I'd be happy to. I think let me take the example of more regulated industries to begin with, because we're seeing that really heat up. Healthcare, financial services. In healthcare, there's been a range of class action lawsuits due to the metapixel, accusations of companies violating wiretapping laws, and the old wiretapping laws being applied to the internet.
Wow.
And this is the WESCA Act is the term, is the actual law that's being invoked in some of these class actions. And then there's been FTC enforcement against GoodRx, BetterHelp, such to the point that health companies are now declaring breaches when they're sharing data with online tracking technologies. That is considered a breach under the health breach notification rule under the FTC interpretation. So that's been an area of focus. We worked with the ComScore 100 health content publisher, for example, and their problem was their consent management platform was sending inconsistent opt-out signals. And so it was kind of pulsating. It wasn't really providing a consistent stream. And that was then being interpreted under the IAB frameworks ambiguously. So it made it hard for the downstream vendors, right? Vendors are dropping consent about 25 to 50% of the time, as I said, made it very hard for them to know what to do when an ambiguous or inconsistent signal was coming from the consent management platform. So what we found was there was a critical error. In this case, it was the client's engineering team had an error there. It was change to the implementation was made, and the problem was corrected. So many times this is a configuration issue, it's a patch issue, and then you just want to monitor for regression or relapses. So that was a good case. And most of our cases kind of come to this conclusion quite quickly, diagnose where the failure point was, make the configuration change, identify the vendor, ensure that they're effectuating what they need to do, because you can really pinpoint where the signal is being dropped, which is one of the advantages.
Yeah, no, that seems great. So you're able to quantify the problem, identify it, look at where it's coming from. So do you then also suggest to them what this potential solution is, or do they kind of come to their own conclusion? We're like, oh yeah, clearly it's on this page. I reviewed the script tag implementation and saw that we weren't populating something correctly, or something to that effect. How does that navigate there?
It depends on the form of partnership. So we will work directly with clients. We can be purely a software vendor to them, and their privacy and engineering teams can make the necessary changes. We also have professional services that layer on top if they want us to interact with the vendors.
Mhm.
We've been through enough of these enough times that the initial reaction is usually skepticism until the data is really incontrovertible that there is a problem. Then we use that, we work with the vendors so they can make their systems better. And we also partner with consulting firms. We have a partnership with a Big Four consulting firm as well as other firms. Sometimes they will layer in the remediation. So it really is specific to the client, but we have a few options because as I said, it is not complex work, but it can be time consuming, and understaffed privacy departments really don't have the bandwidth to do all the remediation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the privacy departments, tend to wear multiple hats. This tends to not be their only roles, and data protection officers are the ones signing off on things, especially in the EU. I guess that's another question. As far as like geography of your clients, are they mostly US based? I know GDPR is kind of like one of the most longstanding, pervasive, and stringent regulations out there. Is there any particular leaning that you have as far as geography?
We tend to be more US focused because we just launched this product last year. It was been fine-tuned for US law. One of our advisors was the co-author of CCPA and CPRA, Richard Arney, and he's actually endorsed our software because of how we help ensure that companies are following these laws. So a lot of US focus. There's plenty of activity here because we're going through the changes that Europe went through 5 years ago.
Right.
But it's not a one and done. Like the 2023 in the US, I think is similar to the way 2018 was when GDPR came into effect in Europe, and companies are scrambling to catch up. It's not an overnight sensation. It does take time. If prior regulations give us a good analog, like Sarbanes-Oxley and CAN spam, and how it took companies successive quarters to get up to speed.
Right.
But we have overseas clients. We have clients in Japan, Europe, Australia, elsewhere. But US is really the focus of activity because we're catching up so quickly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So do you see a time where, there's all these individual state laws that are coming into effect? Is there any major differentiation between them that you might want to highlight? And do you see a time, compound question, do you also see a time where a federal law comes to fruition?
We see what's called the patchwork of state laws will fall into certain categories. There's a Virginia model, for example, that it appears Indiana is embracing. There was prior to that, there was a Washington state model that was embraced in different areas. California's approach, we haven't quite seen anything exactly like that emulated by the other states. So California does stand out a little bit. Rather than trying to optimize for each state laws, it's probably best to set a high watermark across different states. For example, California may set a high watermark around responsibility for your vendor's activity, that if you do not audit, if you do not contract and do not test those contracts, you will be unable to declare that you're ignorant of what clients are doing downstream. But other states, Virginia, Colorado, and Connecticut, have a higher watermark when it comes to opt-in consent for sensitive information. In California, there's not an opt-in. Opt-in meaning you have to affirmatively say, yes, you can share my data. There is no assumption that you can share it without that. So establishing high watermarks, I think, is the right approach for rather than going state by state. With regard to a national law, I don't have a lot of confidence that's going to happen soon. That's what I see happening is similar to what happened with data breach laws, where you now have 50 states with 50 data breach notification laws. It took about 15 years, and California started it. Well, California started it with privacy. We have 7 states, more that are likely to pass laws. I don't know if it'll take 15 years or not, but the states are finding it's easier for them to protect their consumers by taking matters into their own hands. Further, we see the FTC, not only with its enforcement against GoodRx and BetterHelp and Epic Games, laying out some significant fines. But there's also, last year, there was a notice of rulemaking that they're engaging in. So the FTC will fill in the gap at the federal level until we see Congress pass a law. It's hard to get agreement in Congress nationally. And when we're dealing with preemption now, where some of the state laws might get steamrolled by what happens nationally, now you've got an outcry at the state level. So I don't see a national law this year or next year.
Okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. All right, switching gears a little bit. So a timely topic that has, that I ask pretty much everyone that I interview is how they are using generative AI in their practices. We've heard of some, I learn something new every time because everyone approaches it slightly. I didn't even think to ask, Chat GPT for formulas in Google Sheets, and all of a sudden that like has become like one of the main things that I use it for. It's incredible. So, are you using generative AI, and what are your thoughts about it being incorporated into workflows?
Well, first of all, thank you for the tip. I just learned from you about getting formulas out of ChatGPT.
Yeah.
We do use those models. We do use OpenAI models with our analysis of ads because we want to be able to establish very quickly when there's malware inside the ads, and that those models have been effective for image, logo, other forms of recognition that we've trained our models on. So that's how we use it. We also use it for other areas of image detection where it's important to see if there are privacy issues embedded in the ads. So that is part of our workflow. It has been a step saver. We have a phenomenal data scientist who helps us implement that. But I think more broadly, there are conditions to be wary of, and these LLMs like Bard, like ChatGPT, they ingest gigantic amounts of data, scouring the whole web. And so I think in one case, it was at George Washington University, there was an output from ChatGPT that falsely accused a law professor. It cited a news article that didn't exist.
Wow.
I think some people call those hallucinations.
Yeah.
60 Minutes did a segment with Google where Google said with Bard, they're not even sure how to fully stop hallucinations. So that's something to watch out for. Fundamentally, don't share personal information. Don't share proprietary information. These training inputs can become outputs. Reddit, there's a group on Reddit that posted previous chat histories that they are somehow able to pull out of ChatGPT because of a bug. You may have heard about. Yeah. And really formulating internal guidelines about the responsible use of AI. Think before you provide copyrighted material and all that sort of stuff. But everywhere there's media, we found there's privacy risk, whether it's
absolutely.
With us, we began display ads, video ads, apps, the metaverse, and generative AI. So we're in various stages of development across all media to help to detect and correct privacy violations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I read an article. I can't remember exactly which technology firm it was. I think it was a chip manufacturer. Some very well-intended employee decided to use ChatGPT to generate a presentation, and then put a bunch of proprietary information about this upcoming chip that into the OpenAI's models, and all of a sudden now it's in the wild, right? So you have all these things where like these unintended consequences of these new technologies. Now, that being said, it does accelerate 90% of the workload. It's kind of incredible how much more you can get done if you leverage them correctly. Being able to analyze images, analyze code, analyze business processes. It is definitely a game changer, but as you mentioned, have to be extremely wary of all the privacy concerns associated with that. Know that if you put it in there, all of a sudden it becomes their property. So it just it's a give and take. Nothing's free in this world.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, I think that's a good summary.
Wonderful. Well, excellent. Thank you so much for the time today. It's been super informative. If someone wanted to get in contact with you or engage with you, what's the best way of doing so?
Sure. Yeah, a couple ways. Email me. I'm Dan, DAN @boltive.com, and that's the BOLTIV right above my head there on the video. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, Dan Frechtling, FRECHTLING. I like to post on privacy issues. I love to geek out on that stuff. So let's connect there too.
Wonderful. Well, that is a wrap. Join us again next week for another informative session on the Data Deep Dive.
Thanks so much, Ron.